Welcome to the next installment of the Miami Group Sierra Club Virtual Backpack Series.
So welcome everybody. I think we're giving folks another minute. There were a lot of people in the waiting room, letting everybody get filtered in, and then our presenter tonight, Kevin Ernst, is going to take over and run the show.
Hey everybody, what's happening out there? Good to see like 42 smiling faces. I got some logistics going on here. So unfortunately, you got to kind of stare at my nose a little bit because I can't see all the stuff that I got here, different levels and things. So, but tonight we're going to talk about trip planning using online tools. And the lazy web thing, that's a Twitter joke. I think that's one of those things you go out to like the internet and you say, hey, internet, lazy webs, tell me about how to get hard water stains off my wine goblets or daycare in Asheville, North Carolina or something like that. And so this presentation is about how to go out to the internet and use the tools that are out there to get advice for how to plan your own backcountry trips. Basically, let somebody else do most of the hard work for you. But just one thing that I should point out, I did put this in the meetup group message board or a comment on the event, was that there's a link to the slides. If you go out to meetup, you can actually follow along. There's a PDF version. It's bit.ly/SCO for Sierra Club outings, and then today's date in year, month, day format. Just in case I breezed through this a little bit too fast in parts. So I got some videos to show. In order to conserve my bandwidth, which is shared with 2 or 3 other dudes in this house, it would be great if you keep your cameras off unless you need to speak up. And it's perfectly fine if you need to interrupt and ask me to explain something. In fact, I would feel more comfortable if people were to jump in. That way it's not like me just talking to some glass and plastic screen. It would feel more like being in a real room full of people. So totally encouraged. I think that the organizers, Barry and Nancy, will probably keep you all muted. So just put something in the chat and we can unmute you at will. Just jump in anytime. We've got plenty of time to cover what needs to be covered. So, and feel free to switch on your camera if you want us to be able to see your face when you're talking. Nancy and Barry don't recommend full screen view just because in full screen view, you don't really get to see your unmute controls, and the chat controls won't show when you're in full screen. So that's just a small note about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about trip planning using resources that you find on the internet. And what I mean by online tools in this context is I mean something that you don't have to like download and install. So you open up your web browser, the blue E or the orange Fox hugging the planet or the whatever the Chrome thing is, you open that up and you just type in some website and you go out there and you can find trips, you can find maps and elevation profiles and route descriptions and trail conditions and ratings and things like that, photographs that other people have taken. That's what I'm talking about. There are plenty of tools out there for manipulating GPS tracks. I'm actually pretty new to this GPS thing. I did not ever have a GPS unit. I thought it was a pretty specialized thing. I think, now that I have a smartphone like many other people do, and that was how I came into learning about this stuff. I kind of seeing what a pain it is to actually have to deal with the software on a phone that lets you record tracks in the backcountry or route yourself through the backcountry using a map that's in an electronic format. It's kind of a pain, honestly, and I don't like buying the newest thing every 2 years. So I think I might actually at some point go out and try and find a $50 GPS unit on eBay that's just one of the good old ones. And I think I could be perfectly happy with that. So I just want to make that disclaimer that I'm not super high tech about this stuff. But we're going to talk about a couple route planning trips and email address and stuff, but they don't usually try to get any money out of you until you want to use like the super deluxe maps and things like that. So in the case of Gaia, that was like the I guess the Greek, whatever the Greek myth people that came before the gods, or the Titans. So Gaia was like one of those, the Mother Earth type figure from Greek mythology way back. That's the name of a GPS service and an app and a website. That's the one that I just happened to learn through some guys with Chillicothe Outdoor Adventures. They use that one. So this is kind of the way these things go. You learn about one through someone that you backpack with, and then that's just the one you pick. There are other ones out there. AllTrails, I think, is a popular one. Hiking Project is REI's own app and website for this kind of stuff. And then some people talk about Gut Hook. I don't know anything about that, but I guess that's a really good one if you're doing like through hikes of the Appalachian Trail and things like that. So we'll talk about these services just at a pretty high level, talk about how to get a track in, either something that somebody else has pre-recorded or something that you recorded yourself, and you want to maybe massage it a little bit and share it with other people. And then we'll talk about how to print and share those things. And print, I mean, like actually print on paper, because I'm big on that. Like I probably the most expensive backpacking expenditure that I've had in the last year was to buy a printer that has ink that doesn't bleed. So I can actually print maps that won't run in the rain. So you can laugh at me for that, but that was totally a backpacking purchase. And I'm happy that I did it, because inkjet maps have bled on me to the point where they're totally useless, no matter how many plastic bags I tried to steal them in. And then at the end, we should have time for questions. So, all right, again, there's a link to the PDF of the slides there if you need it. Okay, yeah, we're not gonna have a ton of time to talk about the in-depth GPS stuff. There's a link toward the end of the slides for some other meetup group that's in the Carolinas is having a whole workshop on Zoom 3 Wednesdays in a row this month about one specific app, the Gaia app. I just happened to notice it like came in my email right before I was getting ready to put this presentation on. So that's really opportune that somebody's going to go in a little more depth if you want to hear about that stuff. But yeah, GPS is a miracle of science. It is absolutely mind-blowing how it manages to do what it does. And the civilian GPS that we have to deal with, the circle or whatever they call it, like a 1 meter precision, is amazing. And there's basically magic. And because I don't have a fancy GPS, we won't talk about like Garmin's or anything like that. I don't have the watches or the dedicated GPS units. This will mostly just be printing apps and possibly putting it in a smartphone app. Okay, my name's Kevin. I included a picture of myself smiling just in case today was a rough day at work and I forget to smile. So I've been getting beat up at work lately. So yeah, I can be a happy guy, and I usually am on backpacking trips. So I got started with Cincinnati area backpackers, and then I tagged along with Sierra Club outings on several trips, and I always have a good time. Jim and Ella and Nancy and Denise and all those, the regulars are like the cool outdoorsy adventurous aunt and uncles that I never had. So it's fun hanging out with everybody, and I hope we can get back to doing that soon. I have no specific credentials. I'm not a professional adventurer, but the reason I wanted to give this presentation is because of that old adage about to teach a thing is to know it. So this forced me to learn a lot about stuff that I was curious about, but didn't really have the motivation to dig into that much depth. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say right out that I think technology is usually kind of a pain in the butt. I really still like paper maps and guidebooks, but one of the big advantages to having all this stuff electronic is the ability to share it with other people. So you can sort of preview the route that you might take. You can select several possible routes. You can have the computer do the map for you because that's what they're good at doing. You can see a bird's eye view of the route. You can have the computer what I mean specifically is the service compute elevation and mileage for you, which is sometimes difficult to do with pen and paper. It's not impossible. People have done it for ages, probably centuries. but this does make things more convenient and gives you more confidence in your plan. And if you have type A friends like I do that just want to see everything planned out and do not want any kind of uncertainty or adventure in the weekend plan, and only want to start at a specific time on Friday and be home by a specific time on Sunday, then this can help you get those people on board with the trips that you want to do. So it just requires a little more upfront planning. And I can't undersell the fact that you can print your own map. And I just have a few options, a few examples here of things that I've created with a service called CalTopo, which was designed by a guy who was doing search and rescue out on the West Coast. And he just did not find any kind of online tools that were doing what he needed to do. And so he designed it himself, and it was a one-man operation for a long time, but I really like it. Somebody from Chillicothe Outdoor Adventures introduced me to it. And it's been a pretty invaluable tool because it will let you trace routes along existing features. And you don't have to like draw a bunch of dots. It sort of figures out all the wiggles in the tracks. And that's something that nothing else really does quite as good of a job. So the San Francisco people figured that stuff out with all their tech expertise or whatever. And it's amazing when it works. So I've got a couple examples here. These are all CalTopo maps. This one's also generated by CalTopo. It's an elevation profile for one specific track down at Red River Gorge. That's another thing that it can do with just a few button clicks. This is helpful if you've got people at different varying skill levels on your trip and you want to figure out like I took my mother on this trip and it kicked her butt. It was too much ups and downs. And I think it was a valuable lesson for me to learn, because now I can look at this and I know the kind of hard time that mom had on this kind of elevation. And now I can put those two data points together and do it a little bit better next time. Look for something that's a little more level and a little less aggressive ups and downs. Okay, yeah, and that was one more from Cumberland Gap. It's a November trip that Cincinnati area backpackers does nearly every year. And I really, really enjoy that one. It's the first week in November. Okay, yeah, so the big deal with the online thing is that you can save these, you can tweak them, you can shake it, mix them up a little bit year after year, and you can share them with other people. You just send them the link. So they click on something in an email and it pops up a map or a website. It also helps with marketing. Like I was trying to get some people at work to go along with me on this Rowan Highlands trip that I usually do in July. It's down in Tennessee, North Carolina. It's like right there where the three states come together. So you actually end up in Tennessee and North Carolina, crossing the border at various times. I never exactly know what state I'm in when I'm down there, but it's wonderful. And I wanted to just sort of market it to other people and show them how cool it was. And the way that I did that was I took some of my existing tracks that I'd recorded with my phone. I added some waypoints to show where the camps were, and also added some photographs, and then put that out and shared the link with some people to try and just spread the word about it. So this is this website is Gaia. It's a website similar to if you've seen Hiking Project or AllTrails. It just happens to have a smartphone app that goes along with it, and it's one of the ones that I got on board with pretty early. So it's like a Chevy or a Ford kind of thing. I think you just go with what you know at some point. Okay, yeah, so I already went over this, the disclaimer. I'm all for the low-tech stuff, printed maps and atlases and things like that. So I definitely think that there are downsides to relying on the technology. And mostly the battery operated devices are a liability because they could go flat on you at any time, especially in cold weather. I've got a several $100 smartphone that I couldn't manage to keep dry. And nowadays, most of them are have some kind of water resistance features to them, but I kept pulling it out to check my route in the rain, and it got wet through one of the buttons on the front, and it's never quite been the same. So it's not great to rely on those things. The GPS, the high-end GPSs are usually watertight, and I guess the high-end phones are too. but the actual GPS satellites and the signal itself is not foolproof. And the apps on the phone, they're software. I mean, software has bugs, and I've had some terrible bugs in Gaia. And I like to cheer for the underdog and everything, but I mean, the Gaia app on the phone has driven me nuts. It's put me down in the valley when I was on the ridgeline. It's just blanked out finding a GPS signal for miles and miles of a trip. And yeah, so it's just best not to rely on those things. They can be good tools, but just have a backup. And then again, you know, you can't really judge what it's like on the ground from just photographs and trail, you know, trail descriptions and like some lines, some wiggly lines on a map from the internet. So it's helpful to be able to read a guidebook, because somebody's been out there and they can describe the trail conditions for you. Like, what time of year would it be problematic to do a water crossing here? You know, call the rangers, figure out, you know, is the river level or the flow rate going to create a problem for water crossings on this particular trail? So all those things are still necessary. And I think probably the Sierra Club Outings group has done a trip planning seminar before where that stuff has been emphasized. And I don't need to just to re-emphasize it here, but don't want to reiterate it completely. Right. So yeah, it's good if you're going to take other people on a trip. Like all this, you know, making maps and having itineraries and stuff like that is great to get them on board. But it's also important to go scouting first and to know your own limits and the limits of the people on your trip, which was it was a thing that I have learned some hard lessons about, that taking my own family out on backpacking trips around Halloween this past year. All right, so just to quickly go through some terminology you'll hear me throw out here. Global Positioning System, GPS, GPX is an X-ray, KML, and GeoJSON are all three different formats for storing GPS routes or tracks. You know, what's inside the secret sauce inside of all those isn't very important. I mean, it's interesting to programmers. Their GPX and KML are interesting in that they're somewhat human readable. You can take the file and drop it into a web browser window and you'll actually be able to see all the coordinates inside of it. But these are all mostly of interest to programmers, and you just figure out what app or what your device can handle, and most of them will handle GPX. And so that will be your import and export format. The difference between tracks and routes is a track is an historical record. So that's like a breadcrumb trail of where you were at what elevation, at what time, on what day. Every so often the GPS device in your phone or your GPS unit will record all that stuff in a log, and it's a chronological history of where you were at what times. And a route is similar to that, only it's just, there's no time element to it. It's just a start and a finish with some points along the way. So it's like a planned path, but not an historical record of a previous hike or backpacking trip that you've taken. Waypoint is just a name for a dot that you put for a water source or a camp or something like that. And then if you see DMS, it just means degrees, minutes, and seconds. Sometimes you'll see them represented with a degree symbol, and then what looks like a foot, so a single tick mark or apostrophe, and then a double tick mark or double quote. Those are the symbols for degrees, minutes, and seconds. You'll see those a lot on paper maps. And then if you see OSM anywhere, that's just short for OpenStreetMap. That's a volunteer-run project that has a lot of hiking trails, roads, features, shelters, buildings. It's all like just too amazing to almost be a thing that exists, but it's like Wikipedia in the sense that it's a volunteer-run project. There's a not-for-profit, which I guess is a European way of saying a non-profit, behind the scenes, supplying the funding and the resources and the computer resources. I think that MapQuest got involved and probably throws some money in the pot because Google was just eating their lunch as far as mapping went. So they just couldn't afford to pay for their own mapping services. So they kind of rely on the volunteer curated mapping things. But just about everything you're going to see today, it's amazing to me how much it relies on OpenStreetMap and stuff that was put in by some dude or lady. A lot of German people get involved in this, I guess, because, you know, they're a rich, well-educated country and they travel, like half the country's on vacation all the time. So there is this huge German community that builds tools around OpenStreetMap, and they just record GPS tracks and they upload this stuff onto these servers that are run by this foundation, and make these maps, these crowdsourced maps that are not quite on par with multi-billion-dollar companies like Google or Apple, but they're pretty darn good. And these services like CalTopo and Gaia will rely on the OpenStreetMap maps for their base maps, and you'll get to see those later on. So yeah, I mean, if you're feeling spendy or you're feeling magnanimous, you know, maybe throw them some change this year. It's like Wikipedia. It's one of those things you got to pay the tithe, or they're gonna go away or get bought out or start showing ads. And it's too beautiful to be a thing that exists, like public libraries. So somebody's got to support it with funding. And fortunately, it's been going strong for probably a couple of decades now. I didn't look up the specifics, but I heart. Okay, so we mentioned these different services that exist out there already. Most of them have mobile apps because everybody likes apps. They can get $5 from you. They can charge you for fancy maps. Gaia is free, but they'll get some money from you if you want the good National Geographic maps, if you want those to be able to show up as your base map. And I'm sure that there are others that I don't know about. These are just the ones I'm familiar with. All of them have a big old search box at the top where you can put in something that you're interested in, either a region or a specific name of a trail, and it will come back with results like this. This is just a famous spot on the Appalachian Trail that includes a McAfee or McAfee. I've never heard anyone say it. I had a Mrs. McAfee who taught me speech class in high school, so I assume it's that. But this is one loop that's down in Virginia that you can plug this in. You can plug in Triple Crown into REI's hiking project, and it'll come up with this. It tells you the distance, what other people rate it at, which uses a similar rating system to ski hills. So this is a single black diamond. It's a tough hike. It's a pretty tough hike. And there's a 16-mile ridge hike to get back to where you parked on the last day. So that little elevation profile down there tells you where the tough climbs are. It's a heat map where, as long as you're not red-green colorblind, and I mean, it stinks for the people that are, because that graph is basically meaningless to you, but the red bands show you where there's a really aggressive climb, like a 30-degree grade or something like that. I don't know how they rate that specifically, but okay. So you plug in something you're interested in one of these hikes, and you want to figure out how to get there. Well, you can always pull out the road atlas and do it the old-fashioned way. If you like doing a new one every weekend, and you just want the Google lady or Siri's to tell you to turn left and turn right and turn left and turn right until you're there, most of these services will have a button that will open up a Google Maps map, or will, if you're using the mobile application, it will actually open up the Maps application on your phone. So many people, I think, don't have like a dedicated, unless their car has one built in, they don't have like a dedicated GPS unit. So you can sort of pull one of these things up and then have your phone tell you how to get to the trailhead. You can also, I might have to run this again. This might be difficult to see. Let me try this one more time. Yeah, so most places that you can see a GPS coordinate in these apps, you can long press with, you can basically push and hold with your finger. And hopefully you can see that a little better now that I zoom it in. But there's a GPS coordinate there. The apps and Google Maps and these mobile apps are usually in decimal degrees. So you'll see, 38 point something in most of that's like a line that runs through the middle of the United States. And then negative 80 something or 80 something west is, the continental United States. So if you push and hold, you'll be able to copy that coordinate, and then you can paste that into the Maps application. You could show this next screenshot here shows me doing that, where I pasted that into the mapping application on an Apple phone, and you just plug that in and it'll bring it right up. So that's another way to get yourself to the trailhead. Yeah, it's also possible to write those codes down. I just want to mention that you do need at least 4, if not 5 digits after the decimal point to get an accurate position. So with 5 numbers after the decimal point, that's about a 1 meter precision. So 3 feet, that's enough to, you know, get you to the outhouse or whatever. But 4 digits after the decimal place will be enough to get you in the parking lot, you know, or at least close to where you can find the road signs. So you can write those down and you can type those manually into your GPS if you have one of the ones that's like built into your console in your car. That's totally possible. Okay, so I got to breeze through this. I hope that everybody's all right with this, you know, latitude and longitude stuff. I mostly made these slides for me because I wanted to be able to explain it, you know, competently. I have never taught 5th grade geography. I think probably many, if not most people on the call are good with this, but I will share my mnemonic for remembering which are lats and which are longs. Longitude, lines of longitude, you can remember that as longitude because it's like an orange slice. And I always got those mixed up, so I like having mnemonics for stuff like that. If you want to have a silly one for latitude, it's like apple rings, like dried apple rings where they cut the apple across the middle. So you can remember it as lines of latitude or something like that. But anyways, so yeah, silly mnemonics help me out. But the coordinate system on our planet and the cardinal directions, so the compass and map directions are all divided into increments of 60. This was just because geographers a long time ago, when we figured out the planet was a sphere, were super in love with the Babylonians' base 60 number system. And there's an article that I linked to. If you click on that blue text in the slide, which has got some background on that, it was interesting. In the degrees, minutes, and seconds system, every line of latitude or longitude is divided into increments of 60 and then subdivided again into increments of 60. So they're called degrees, minutes, and seconds. And then any smaller fraction of a second, which would be down to like centimeters of resolution, they just put a decimal on there. So there isn't like something silly like milliseconds. Yeah, and then the poles are plus or minus 90 and the equator is 0 for lines of latitude. And the prime meridian is at 0 longitude, and the international date line all the way on the other side of the planet, you know, between like Hawaii and the Philippines, is at 180. So Cincinnati is at 36 north and 86 or 84 west, 36 north, 84 west, roughly. And I've got a slide in here where I give you some rules of thumb or some guidelines, just like some ways of thinking about decimal degrees. Just having like a rough estimation of like, oh, 0.1 decimal degrees is this many miles. And I'll bring that up briefly. So I found this on, I think, the US Geological Survey's website, a really good explanation of, you know, like what does a line, like how far is it between lines of longitude and latitude in the United States? And 38 north latitude is a dividing line roughly through the middle of the continental US. It happens to go through Lexington, Kentucky, so it's pretty convenient for us because I like lots of hikes down around that area. The lines of longitude do converge at the poles. So the sort of square formed by 1 degree of latitude and longitude is not perfectly square, but these numbers, I sat down and did the math like old school chemistry, stoichiometry style, did all the unit conversions, and this is what I came up with. So 1 degree is about 50 miles in either direction, either between lines of latitude or lines of longitude or lines of latitude, and roughly in the part of the country where we live. 1 minute is about a mile, and 1 second is about 100 feet. And then the decimal degrees are broken down on the left. And what the gist of the left column is that if you just write down 36 degrees and 36 degrees north and 84 degrees west as your coordinates, you could be off by as far as 5 miles in either direction. If you write down something to the 4th decimal place, then you'll be able to see it with your eyes, not through tree cover, but you'll be able to see it. So I found these helpful because I always look at these numbers and I wonder, I just wondered. So I sat down and computed it. Okay. So let's imagine that you found a cool trip on one of these websites. I'm going to use REI's hiking project because I just feel good about REI, and some of the other services try to upsell you constantly. And I spend enough money at REI that I feel like I'm subsidizing their service, and I deserve it. So I just like that one. It has the least amount of clutter and advertisement stuff all over the place. So that's the one we're going to stick with. AllTrails is totally good, and so is Gaia. Gaia's search and the curation of their pre-made hikes is not as good, but they might come around at some point. So let's try and find a trip that you could leave after work on Friday and get back home by like 8 p.m. on Sunday. We'll find a loop. We'll estimate the mileage. We'll figure out like what the elevation gain and loss is just based on the elevation charts from the hike on hiking project. And we'll also plug these into CalTopo, which is a tool that you can use to really compute this stuff, like extend the routes and add miles, and then get your own calculations of distance and elevation gain and loss for the specific route that you designed. And then we're not going to have time to do the side trip, but you'll get the gist from just watching this. And also we'll talk about making a map. And then if I have time, I have one slide about just creating an itinerary, and I'll pull up a sample itinerary that includes a pack list, just kind of lessons that I've learned over having done these over the past year. I only really started making itineraries and pack lists recently, so it's a new skill for me. Alrighty, so I put in, I happen to like this little area, this kind of quiet, out of the way area in Big South Fork National River and Recreation, Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area, which is operated by the National Park Service. It's in Tennessee, so it's in the northern part of Tennessee. It's geologically very similar to the gorge, but far fewer people there. It's all kind of part of that big strip that the Dam Boone National Forest is adjoining to the north in Kentucky. It goes all the way up to the Cave Run Lake area through the Red River Gorge. So I really like this area. There aren't a ton of people, and I love this loop down there around the Burnt Mill Bridge. So I plugged that in. I found a hike that was a 4-mile day hike, but that's not enough. So we're going to work with that. Let's have a look at what that looks like. And this screenshot's from Hiking Project. The links are down there. It's an intermediate, looks like a day hike. You can see there's not any really aggressive elevation there, and they've got it at 4.1 miles. So I mean, that's not really enough for a weekend. So let's see what else we can do here. I noticed there's like this kind of little tail going off into the, off onto the northeast there. So let's figure out what that is. Oh, cool. So I zoom out, and I can see that this is the Burnt Mill Bridge loop. And there's this big, long, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4 mile, maybe even 5 mile connector that you could take out through some pretty level terrain if you look at the profile for it. And then it goes out to this pretty aggressive loop that's really popular, and it's highly rated. It's got all the cool photographs and all the neat rock formations and stuff like that. And that's called Honey Creek Loop. So if we put those two together, I think we can do like probably 10, 12, 15 miles in a weekend. And Honey Creek is rated, I forget what the one black diamond is. I mean, it's like difficult, I think is what it's called. Yeah. So Honey Creek Loop is yeah, it's very picturesque. So we'll stick these two together and sort of make it like a double-ended lollipop or a barbell, whatever you want to call it. So the first step to take is you go to Hiking Project, you scroll down a little bit, and you click on the thing that says download Gpx file. And then right away, they're going to throw this thing in your face where they're going to make you log in. And they want you to log in for all the reasons that you can imagine. They want to, track what you're clicking on and sell your name to people that are going to market stuff to you. If you don't like that, if you have Gmail, this is just like a random tip. You can put anything after a plus sign, after your username. It will still get delivered to your account, but you can sort of, you can sort of like, if that email ends up being used for something nefarious, you can just trash emails coming into that particular address later on. It's called plus addressing. You can look that up in a search engine, but Gmail does it. A lot of other services do it. That's how I managed to deal with this stuff. There's also like if you really don't like giving your email address to some weird service that you're only going to use like once, there's a website called mailinator.com that gives you throwaway email addresses. This link, I'm pretty sure if you were to click on that in the slides, it will let you download this GPX without logging in at all. So you can get a direct link once you log in, and I've done that for you. So you just get that file, you save it wherever. You know, I mean, this is like stuff that I get the fact that there's 3 different web browsers that people use. Everything looks a little bit different. I took a picture of the window from Firefox. I mean, it's going to look a little different for you, but I think, you know, most everyone will be able to figure it out. There's this file that's going to be on your computer somewhere, and you need to just remember where that was, because we're going to put it into another website. We're going to upload it to another website, and that's CalTopo. So CalTopo, I mentioned this, it was just one Silicon Valley tech bro who was doing search and rescue either on the side, or maybe that was his full-time job and he just happened to know how to do website stuff. And he put this together because there was no tool that let him integrate different layers of maps and then draw stuff on top of it. And that is what CalTopo is really good at. And it's pretty magnanimous of him. He's like made most of the useful parts of the service free. Where they get money is if you want to print like bigger maps or do these things that, you know, like save maps that aren't visible to other people using the service. So if you want things to be private, or you want bigger maps, or you want to be able to store lots of maps for a long time, because they'll just disappear after a certain amount of time, then that's all stuff that they get money from to keep the lights on and pay the bills. And I like the underdog. I like the craft brew aspect of you know, a website that's run by only 10 people. So I have links to their other stuff there. we basically already talked about this, but it has just a mind-boggling number of layers of different map layers. So base maps and layers, everything from like the topographic maps that come from the Forest Service, which are the US, you know, the Forest Service or US Geological Survey quad or quadrant maps. They've got stuff that has to do with like rainfall and wind and sun exposure and fire activity, and you can layer all those on top of the map. And it's really good at detecting the underlying features of the map, which are coming from OpenStreetMap, even though like they're not streets in that sense, but that service provides even hiking trails and you know, bodies of water and things like that. So you can actually draw a wiggly line over a trail that some person you know, took their GPS out into the woods and uploaded that to OpenStreetMap, and it all gets fed back into CalTopo. And then the PDF making stuff is super great. So they don't upsell you very, there's not like annoying stuff popping in from all sides trying to get you to buy the product. They are there because they got to make money, but that's another thing I like about it. It's very like, just get me, like there's a button that you click and you're in a map and you can start doing stuff. There's no need to even sign in. And I love that. So that's why we're talking about this one. Okay, so assuming that you had this file that you downloaded and you could find it again, you click this browse button, it will open the thing on your computer that looks like the thing that opens when you want to open something. You go find where that GPS file was, you import it. It will ask you if you want to, like, if the track has waypoints, so if somebody included waypoints of like where water sources and things are, then you can decide to include those or exclude them. And then you click some button that says go. And what you'll end up with is, all right, let's let it play out. So I went and found the GPX. I called it, I think Hiking Project called it burnt mill loop, blah, 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 .gpx. I went up to the import menu option. See me do it again. I clicked browse, I went and found where it was. It was like on my desktop or something. And then you'll see that track come in with a red outline. And that's all there is to it. All right. So there are a couple things I recommend after you get that that track or route into CalTopo is that you switch the map layers that you use. My favorite base layer is called TF Outdoors. It's based on OpenStreetMaps with like most of the cruft and uninteresting things that you wouldn't care about in the backcountry removed. So it will have waterways and hiking trails. And then I also like to turn on, because the map builder overlay is the red lines that you see, that tends to actually have hiking trails that might be just unmarked on the underlying TF Outdoors map. So I like to turn those two things on. They give you a really clean map without a lot of extra junk on it. I'm just going to talk through this. This may be the last thing we have time to talk about before the wrap-up slides. But basically what I'm doing here is demonstrating the bread and butter of CalTopo, and that is getting a map, getting a track or a route into CalTopo and then splitting it into pieces. So what you'll see me doing here is clicking on different parts of the red track and breaking it into sections. And then I like, what I like to do when you won't see me wrap this up until the end, but what I like to do is I like to take day one and make it a light color. So like a teal, and then I like to go to turquoise and then midnight blue. So I make the colors of the tracks by the day be darker because, you know, like on the third day, you're kind of hurting. So that's just how I like to color code it. But what I've done here is I took the 4-mile day hike loop and I split it at a spot where I knew there was a camp that I could get to that was a mile from the parking lot on a Friday evening. And I'm splitting it right there, and I'm making, like I got the colors wrong, but you'll see me fix that later on. So I split it right at where I knew that camp was. And now at this point, the kind of fuchsia color will be the first day's worth of hiking. There's a road crossing and an intersection with that big long, that's the John Muir Trail. That's the Kentucky-Tennessee version of the John Muir Trail. I think there's another one. So I split it that road crossing, and then I use the extend option to keep adding more sections to the track. And you can see as I'm moving my mouse that CalTopo is, as long as you're going with the shortest distance, it will figure out how to move your route along the wiggles of the features that already exist there. So I've taken it up to the south, I guess, terminus or the trailhead for the Honey Creek Loop, and I'm wrapping it around the west side of the Honey Creek Loop. And then I have to sort of zoom in here because there's the JMT, the John Muir Trail continues up the hill and it goes toward Leatherwood Ford, which is like kind of the main hub at a Big South Fork. So I had to kind of zoom in there to figure out that, or to precisely route that trail around that kind of switchback there. And I took it down a riverbank to a campsite on the river. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to try and join I'm making sure that the section that was just the day hike section plus the big long JMT section is actually a single big long route. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start at that Riverside camp and I'm going to make a day 2. So this will be Sunday. If I hiked in about a mile and a half to the campsite at the South Park part of the Burnt Mill Bridge Loop on Clear Creek, then Saturday I would hike to this other campsite on the South Fork of the Cumberland River, and then Sunday I would start at that Riverside campsite and hike back out. And this is what I'm doing. I'm basically creating that last that second day. I guess I'm calling it day 2 here. Honey Creek back to the Burnt Mill parking lot. And so I'll end up making this like a deep purple color so that the color coding indicates the sequential order that the tracks go in. I also like increasing the line weight so it's just a little bit more visible, and also it prints a little bit better. It looks distinct compared to waterways and other hiking trails, just so your tracks will be a little bit bolder from the hiking trails, the other hiking trails on the map. You can see I made a mistake here where I clicked accidentally, because this is there's a lot going on this website, and there's only 2 mouse buttons to work with. You click with the left mouse button in order to create new points in your route and also to scroll. And it's pretty good at figuring out which one you want to do when. But you can see that I made a mistake up there where I accidentally clicked off to the side, and I'll fix that in a minute. You can go back and re-edit the route and sort of put that point back in place. In fact, I had to do it like a really complicated way too, because it's only when you're creating a new route that it follows the wiggles. When you go back and modify the points, I didn't want to have to make like 50 points to fit it back on the wiggles of the track. So I'll actually cut out that section that I messed up, and I'll generate a new section, and I'll merge them back all together. And so the last few steps that you're seeing happen here are basically that. And we don't necessarily have to watch it. I think I'll wait until it stops being interesting, and then we'll just go on to the next slide.
Hey, Kevin, a quick question. Chuck was asking where the intel came on the campsites. Was that in one of these? Was it already as a waypoint or something, or did you just know where those were?
I scouted it over Thanksgiving this year. Yeah, okay. And that Riverside campsite is popular with the kayakers, so it was a well-developed campsite, and it's hard to get. There's no easy way to get to it. So I was tired. I was hiking around the east side of the Honey Creek Loop, and it was dark, and I just needed a flat spot to camp. And so I scrambled down the. You can see the lines of the topo lines there are very narrow, so there's a steep hillside to scramble down, just hoping I would find a flat spot by the river. And it opened up into 2 or 3 different well-developed camps that the kayakers use. So I completely got lucky on that.
Okay, but it wasn't part of the hiking project or any of the stuff you imported. That was personal knowledge.
Yeah, a guidebook would have that stuff.
Right.
In this case, the track from Hiking Project did not have any waypoints in it.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the question, Chuck. I appreciate it. All right, so I gotta get going here. Let's you all get the point. I basically cut out the broken section, put a new section in there, and then merged them all together. Just a couple other simple, just quick tips. Over on the left-hand side of CalTopo, after you've done the import of a GPX track, you'll have a list of the individual tracks. Like if you break a longer multi-day track up into pieces, you'll see the individual pieces shown over to the left in the lines and polygon section. If you have like a lot going on in your map and you're like, I just want to zoom on this one part of my trip, you click on the name, and it will recenter and zoom just that one part of the track. So it makes it easier to figure out where you are if you're trying to put together like 5 days worth of stuff. And then there's also a thing that I think I have a short video showing how to do it, but there's this option called Resample. You'll find it called Simplify or Compress in some other tools. But what that means is the example that you see in the image there, which is a little maybe difficult to focus on, is a track that I recorded. So it's a track, it's a chronological log. I mean, I probably went down to the river to, I don't know, look at the river there, but you can see it's all crazy and wacky. And if you're gonna, not only does that take up more space, it makes your phone have to work harder if it's got to load this thing up. It makes CalTopo have to work harder to load all those points. It's not really helpful because obviously I was just, proceeding from point A to point B left to right there. And this resample option will help you, I did it again. Will help you eliminate the extra noise there. I was so clever with that Zoom thing. Now I gotta fix it.
Hey, Kevin, quick question in the chat while you're doing that. Is it possible to add text to the CalTopo maps before you print them so you can add titles or dates or whatever?
I did that in a separate tool. I don't actually know the answer to that. That's a really good question though. Usually what you'll do is you'll add a waypoint, and the waypoint itself has text associated with it, and the map will print out. Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I think if you add a waypoint, the text label on the waypoint will show up. Maybe that is satisfactory. What I did when I had to sort of create annotations on top of a map to share it with somebody, I used just the annotation tools built into the PDF viewer on my Mac. And I drew on it with like a digitizing tablet and a pen, just kind of free-handed it. Yeah, so there was this one note that I made there about when you resample stuff, every 100 feet is fine for backcountry navigation. And that will get rid of all the times that you went to go look at a flower or go to pee in the bushes or whatever. This video is too long for us to sit here and watch it, but it's exactly what I described in pictures instead of words. And unfortunately, the PDF version of the slides that you see that we shared the link to is not going to have this stuff. But I'll try to figure out if there's a way to get those out there for mass consumption. If not this year, maybe next year if we do this again.
Actually, while you're on that point, Kevin, we are recording this, so people can come back and at least see the parts that you have presented. So.
Okay. Yeah, I keep forgetting about that. There's a smartphone app called Avenza, which is kind of aggravating to me because it's so, I know that they want to make money, but they have so limited this. And they ask you for money so often, and they put these sort of artificial limitations on what you can and can't do with it, that I find it aggravating. But many national park, state and local parks will put their maps in Avenza Maps, like Map App Store, and you can go download, like for example, the River to River Trail in Illinois through their Shawnee National Forest. You could find the whole set of maps in Avenza. It's just that if you have so many maps and you reach like a threshold, the maps become dumb again. They don't navigate you intelligently. So when CalTopo generates a PDF, it actually embeds enough information for Avenza to figure out how to locate you based on your GPS location on that PDF, and you can actually navigate from it with a crosshair showing you where you are. And that's an interesting feature that CalTopo just builds that in. Like you don't even have the option to not use it. And so I have a little, just a little video here that shows taking a CalTopo PDF map and putting it into Avenza. You just copy the address, the URL, which you can see there. It'll be /p/some numbers and letters. And then if I were standing in Big South Fork in the Burnt Mill Creek Loop, I would see my location updated on this P. I guess that was that's Cumberland Gap. So, but okay. Yeah, it's time for me to wrap up. I would like to leave a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to flip through these pretty quick. But the itinerary stuff we won't have time to talk about. But that link does this clickable link here does take you out to one that I created for the Cumberland Gap trip, I think, in November. It's nice to include a pack list and emergency contact information and give that stuff to, especially if you're a group leader who's putting together a trip with 6 or 8 or 9 or 12 people. All that stuff is reassuring if you give that stuff to their next of kin. So these are all just things that I've sort of come to just assume are best practices based on other itineraries I've seen people give me. There are other tools that you can use besides the websites to manipulate these track files. There's one that comes with the Garmin products, which is free. It's just that you have to pay for the maps. Otherwise, you basically will just get a map that shows the nearest roads, but not actual hiking trails. And there are 2 other free tools that will work on any operating system. One of them is affiliated with OpenStreetMap, and I found it to be really, really good, like very capable. And it was the best tool I found for fixing a lot of little points, like all those little zigzag spots where you went off into the weeds for some reason. If you wanted to take those out of your GPX track and smooth it out so you could share it with somebody, the JOSM tool, the Java OpenStreetMap, was the best tool for that. This is the link I was referring to, the Gaia workshop. So that's 3 consecutive Wednesdays starting, I guess, next week. And I can post that link in the meetup discussion for this event as well. Just kind of spread the love there. We don't have time for the bonus stuff. And that's all I got. If you're just like sitting on some extra cash around Christmas time, maybe give some money to your local national park if you got one close. I mean, Big South Fork, they run a tight ship down there. They're just so good. So maybe give them, $50 or something if you got $50 lying around. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks, Nancy and everybody.
That was
putting this
great,
together.
Kevin. That was great, Kevin.
I think we got a few minutes for questions. I don't know how much we can go over, or maybe we can't go over at all. So if I stole question time away from people, I apologize. But yeah, please lay it on me. Yeah. I'm willing to stay late too, as long as there's nobody, after us.
So I just clicked I just changed the settings so that anyone who has a question they'd like to ask, you can still use the chat box if you'd like, but you can also at this point unmute yourself and just ask Kevin directly without having to take time to type it if you'd like to. You covered a lot of information, Kevin. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it was maybe 2 hours worth of information, huh?
Or 2 years worth. I mean, it took a while for you to learn all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so if I guess it doesn't hurt anything to leave that slide up, does it?
I think Barry changed the slide that's showing. We've got one
so
up now that shows how to become a Sierra Club member.
Yeah, we had a question in the chat about how to find our meetups, our outings, and also how to join Sierra Club if you're interested. So I threw this slide up.
Yeah, I can add that to. If I hang on to this for next year or whenever, I can add that, in at the end too, if you would like.
So Kevin, I do see a question from Barb asking, have you tried this on the AT?
No, I'm not there yet. I can do 10, 12 miles a day, not 20, 25. I might work up to it, by the time I'm 65 or something, getting ready to retire. It just hasn't happened. Does that answer your question, Barb? I have not. All of the techniques that I mentioned could be used to navigate yourself on the Appalachian Trail and save having to carry the paper guidebooks. But just based on my experience with the electronic devices, I would rather have the packages of paper maps coming in my food shipments, every week or whatever. Like I would just feel much better with that. And the Appalachian Trail is so well blazed that.
Not in all places. In some places, it's really difficult to follow. The blazes aren't all that great. Probably down south, it's better, but up north, some of the hiking I did on a trail in Massachusetts, New York, not so good.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with the northern parts. But thanks for pointing that out. You got any recommendations for just like 100-mile sections that are real nice?
Well, when you go in that New York through Massachusetts up, I believe it goes into Vermont and New Hampshire. That area is just really pretty, very, very nice.
I see Elizabeth made it up. The gut hook is big for AT through hikers.
Yeah, that's the only context I've ever heard people refer to that. as being an AT kind of thing.
So if we don't have more questions, it looks like we're winding down here. So Kevin, I just want to say thanks again for a great presentation. That was a lot of information and all the resources that you shared. And we put a link in Barry put a link in here earlier in the chat box. If you didn't see it, you might want to scroll back and catch it. It's a link to the page on our Sierra Club website where all of our virtual outings are listed. If you scroll down the list, you'll find this one. It'll be near the bottom because it's one of the later ones. And with probably by the middle of next week, would that be about right, Barry? The recording should be on there?
It should be just a couple of days. So
okay. So if you go to the link for this presentation on that page on our website in a few days and click on that, you'll find a link to the recording of it, as well as a link to the PDF. And you should also have gotten in the chat box earlier, a couple of times we posted the link to the slides for this presentation as well. So between those two things, hopefully you'll find all the tools that you need to go back and review this stuff for when you're ready to use it. Because it was a lot. That was too much to memorize for sure. So thanks again, Kevin. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah,
Barry,
totally.
you have anything you want to add?
Thanks
No,
everybody
just-
for sitting through it.
Yep, just add my thanks. Great job, Kevin, and you know, wealth of knowledge there. So it sounds like something I'm looking forward to playing with a little bit. So great job, thank you.
You bet. You're welcome. Thanks everybody for coming.
And we're all looking forward to the day we can go out and do this in person again. So hope to see you on the trail then. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.